Shalom, shalom, shalom to everyone watching. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero. We are going to continue very early this day the series that I have been putting together called Anti-Zionism is Anti-Semitism, is Anti-Judaism, is Anti-Torah. We left off on the previous regarding the issue in summary of the Zionist movement, which includes the history of Eretz Israel during a period of time in which it was under the British mandate, just before the Balfour Declaration, making the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, the receptors of the land once again. Now, this plays an important part because there were, in fact, 3 oaths. And this is the basis of the anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic movements of Satmar and Neturkarta's reasons in thinking why Israel is an illegitimate state. It is based upon the 3 midrash found in the Talmud Babylonia. These 2 oaths, or the 3 oaths, that the Jewish people were to take, included one of the areas of not to mount a complete return by force. And of course, these 3 oaths, which are derived from biblical verses during a sugya or Talmudic passage about Zerah, desire to move to Babylon, to the land of Israel. Zerah realizes that the teacher Rav Yosef considers it a biblical sin to leave Babylon for the land of Israel. So they utilized this concept to say it was prohibited to leave the exile until certain conditions were met. The sugya begins in Ketubot 110b and continues to Ketubot 111a. Now there were these 3 oaths that are plainly conveyed, and the Gemara quotes it. Why are these 3 oaths? Well, one, that Israel should not go up to the land in a wall, or in masses. Rashi interprets this forcefully. Number 2, the Holy Land adjured Israel not to rebel against the nations of the world. 3, the Holy One adjured the nations that they would not oppress Israel too much. So these are the bases of the 3 oaths, which according to these Haredi group, including, by the way, not only Satmar, not only Neturkarta, but even Chabad and other Haredim that hold this way. And there's a lot of information on this whole entire point and the viewpoints of the Rishonim regarding this as well, including Maimonides, who was very concerned about these false messianic movements that led the Yemenite Jews away from traditional practice in letter and state. So we'll go into that a little bit further, but I want you to understand what is the motive, or what is the understanding of why we have religious anti-Zionist among the children of Israel today. And it has nothing to do with the Torah. Because when we take a look at this particular midrash, which is a midrash, which means that there is an issue whether it has a pinge, halachic pinge, on it. But the Gemara also basically makes reference to this, why these 3 oaths are very important. And the main one is these first 2, that Israel should not go up to the land in a wall, in masses. And number 2, Israel is adjured not to rebel against the nations of the world. So based on those 2 contexts, we'll see in history that these 2 oaths were completed. By that I mean there is no longer a state of rebellion against the nation. As a matter of fact, as we will see, it was the nation of the world, the United Nation, that gave the authority of Israel to be able to return back to the land. And obviously, this was one of the things that was purported. So the whole idea of supporting for the building a Jewish state took place in the 19th century. Now, the desire of every single Jew was to go back to the land. It is the very heart of what Zionism is. This is why, technically speaking, a biblical Jew, a Jew that observes Torah, must be, by all definition, be a Zionist. The 19th century plan to rebuild a Jewish state required a population and a place which was Eretz Israel, and the Holy Land, at that time called Palestine because it was under the British mandate. And of course, they rechanged the whole area into a name that was very easy for them to be able to still keep rooted the actual land that belonged to Israel, that was exiled throughout the four corners of the world. And thus they called it Palestine. The great powers that took place after World War I, as a population, Jewish identity, anti-Semitism, and the failure to find civic equality in Europe catalyzed Jewish immigration to a democratic setting, and support for the option to build a Jewish state. The Jewish population increased from 25,000 in 1882 to 600,000 in 1948. With 400,000 Jews in Palestine, what was known under the British mandate as such, by 1940. The Jewish landowners grew also from 450,000 dunams. A dunam was about a quarter of an acre, to 1.4 million dunams into 1940. And here we see the growth of the Jewish people in the land, and to understand how the Jewish immigrants reconnected themselves with the land, it was through purchase of small areas of land which was owned by Arab owners, and their interaction with the British as administrators of the Palestine after World War I. And I'm only referencing as Palestine because this was the name of the region that was given over by the British mandate. And here we find that the Arab owners, of their interaction with the British administrators, saw that the Zionist land acquisition began to grow a core essential in establishing what was soon to be called in 1948 Israel, a pace of physical and demographic growth over the 70-year period, which steadily but even uneven Jewish immigrants were able to establish a continuous territorial area, partly because of an impoverished peasantry, burdened by centuries of debt, and elite politicians motivated for the potential massive profits from land sales, alienated enough land to allow Zionists to piece together the territorial nucleus that eventually became known as Israel. Now, charting the geographic place of 315 Jewish settlements built in that period unfolds the footprint for the state and provides an easy visual explanation for the United Nations proposed borders and its 1947 partition plans, known as the UNGA Resolution 181. If the UN would have known that giving the green light to the Jewish people to be able to resettle the land would have created a state of Israel and a state for the first time of the Zionist people, the Jewish people, they perhaps may have repented having done so. But once given the green light, the oath which we were bidden to obey, is no longer binding, and thus every single Jew, religious, Haredi, Hasidic or not, are obligated by the permission that was granted all Jews to resettle the land. So these people that you're seeing wrapped around with black kapatas, black hats, and carrying a different flag is only demonstrating their true betrayal to the words of our sages, which we fulfilled, we completed, and really it's spitting upon our ancestors' face. And this is why I consider them, the people like the Natur Karta and other groups like them, as Mosarim. Mosarim means people who have betrayed the Jewish people. Now, the opposition to a Jewish state in compromise with Zionism was exemplified in a conversation in the Arab League, which had 3 Zionist leaders in September of 1947. During the meeting, Azam Pasha, the head of the Arab League, declared no compromise with the Jews was possible. It might be that we Arabs will lose Palestine, but war with you is our only option. The Arab leaders rejected the partition plan, and the Palestinian Arabs were denied the independent representation as their agency was effectively usurped by Arab leaders and states. The UN resolution provided a crucial legal framework for the eventual establishment of the State of Israel. The groundwork for international support and legitimacy of the Jewish homeland building was laid decades earlier through the League of Nations and its mandate for Palestine 1922, which tasked Britain with facilitating Jewish immigration, land settlement, and self-governing institutions while protecting the rights of the residents, of all of them. Together with these milestones, it underscored the global recognition of Jewish self-determination, enabling the transformation of the Jewish population in Palestine into a viable Jewish state in 1948. The creation of Israel was formed in May 14th, 1948, with the Declaration of Independence, which proclaimed the establishment of the Jewish state in Eretz Israel as the Jewish nation. The declaration highlighted the historical connection of the Jewish people to the land and the support of international legal framework such as the UN Partition Plan and the imperative of a homeland following the atrocities of the Holocaust. In other words, this was a way for those who suffered through the Holocaust and needed a place where to land to be called their own country, as it were. This newly declared state was called Israel and sought recognition from the international community and was admitted to the United Nations in May 11th, 1949. In other words, a year after the Declaration of Independence under UNGA, under the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 273, which acknowledged its statehood and commitment to peace, equality for all of the inhabitants. Further solidifying its identity as a refuge for Jewish worldwide, Israel enacted the Laws of Return in 1950, granting every Jew the right to immigrate and gain citizenship. These foundational steps ensured Israel's emergence as a sovereign state dedicated to the Jewish self-determination and principles. There is a lot of information that one can find even online, including Israel's Law of Return, admission of Israel to the United Nations, Israel Declaration, and the famous Balfour Declaration. Now, why am I highlighting all of this? Because these three oaths that were administered, that Jews could not return to the land unless certain conditions were met. And those conditions had to be that we would not go up to the land as a wall, as a major mass migration. So Rashi interprets it forcefully. We didn't go forcefully. It was something that was negotiated by the United Nations and was given permission to do so. In addition to that, the Holy One adjured Israel not to rebel against the nations of the world. Until this day, it has not. And yet, during this whole period of time, until it became a nation, we did not go and rebel against the nation of the world until, just of recent, that a nation, Iran, sought to eliminate the nation that was accepted by the United Nations on a whole national plane, was then its existence attacked. And this is the reason why it has a right as a nation for self-preservation and self-defense. And this is what we're seeing today, which is upsetting a lot of people, because we're seeing that God is with the Jewish people, with the IDF, with the Israeli forces, and the state of Israel. Now, you may argue, well, it's not really a religious state. You know, the state of Israel is not like, say, Iran, which is completely a theocracy. No, just the opposite. It's a combination of a blend of religion, Judaism, and a blend of the people, the culture, and the ethnicity, all melted all at once. So you can't pick and choose which one you want to choose. There are many Jews in Israel that are not religious. They're completely secular, but their ancestry is from Jewish descendants. Mother, now Israel accepts father ancestry. So thus, we find here the very basis of why anyone toting the anti-Zionist banner, like Anti-Torah, like Satmar, and even, I would say, for a period of time, Chabad, these are entities who perhaps in their essence were anti-establishment is now becoming. Now let me just say this, Israel, in particular, Chabad has been more leaning towards supporting the Jews in the state of Jews than any of the other religious identities. And I mean, you see activists in the Turkard trying to destroy and do harm to the Jewish state. You don't see that with Chabad, just the opposite. They support it. They support it. And I remember Bibi Netanyahu going to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to get his blessing, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave him his instructions, what he had to do. So we don't see that with that Hasidic group, but many other Hasidic groups, you'll see that antagonism between the state and the religious ideologies. There's so much more that we can talk about, which is based upon a prolonged duration of exile, which finally we're seeing that period of time ending, and hopefully soon we'll see the building of the Beit HaMikdash. As we mentioned, the Rambam did not explicitly discuss, for example, the 3 oaths. However, he did maintain that it's incumbent upon Jews in every generation as a positive commandment to attempt to repossess the land of Israel. So even though you may not see a complete declaration banning to take on again and create a Jewish state, yes, yet all of the Rishonim, all of them favored the idea of doing everything they could to take repossession of the land. And this is why it becomes of great importance to understand why we Jews are, in essence, all Zionists. We believe in the Zionist dream. In the first video, I mentioned the biblical reasons. And here I'm basically summarizing the story of why there are those who basically are refusing to accept that these 3 oaths are no longer halakhically binding, and they should be treated that they were actually nullified by the completion of the United Nations, bringing us in as a nation of nations, in other words, as an entity representing the whole world. And thus, the anti-Zionist response to this, like according to Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, completely disregards all halacha, all Torah, and all completion of the fulfillment of these 3 oaths. And thus, they are now becoming an enemy within Israel. And I say an enemy, I'm speaking about Mosarim, that they're betraying the interest of the Jewish people in the land. And be very honest, I think they should not even be granted unless there's a change in their viewpoint completely and take on and embrace Israel as the Jewish land, as the beginning of perhaps the time of redemption. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, and yes, we at the Ways of Israel, we are Zionists without a doubt. We're biblical Zionists, we're not secular Zionists. We believe in fulfilling what the Torah says, including what the Rambam makes mention about taking upon ourselves the yoke of returning to the land. There's other issues, but I won't go into that right now. So may God give us strength and give us the foresight to understand that we all belong, all Jews belong, all Jews are given a portion to Eretz Israel, and may we all be able to fulfill that before leaving this world. Shalom, shalom, and have a wonderful Shabbat shalom.